Buonasera a tutti. Good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also, be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at the Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo. Grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. When most of us hear the name Pinocchio, we think of a wooden puppet whose nose grows when he lies. But Carlo Collodi's 1881 novel is not a simple morality tale. It is a fierce social satire, a political critique, a meditation on poverty, education, responsibility, and ultimately what it means to become human. Tonight, we're joined by Anna Kraczyna, scholar, writer, and co-translator of the Penguin's classic edition of The Adventures of Pinocchio. Born in Florence in a multilingual family, Anna brings a unique bicultural perspective to Collodi's masterpiece. Her work restores the darkness, humor, and radical intelligence that were often softened in adaptation. So don't go anywhere, but we'll be right back. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring in person or online to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at istitutomondoitaliano.org. Welcome, Anna. Benvenuta al Italian Radio Hour. How are you today?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me. It's a true honor. Thank you very much.
So, Anna, before we start talking about Pinocchio and Collodi, I actually would like to focus a little bit about your background because it's very fascinating. Both, the different cultures that you grew up in, the profession of your parents, and then eventually your career. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to elaborate on Di C'era una volta Anna. Once upon a time, there was Anna.
Grazie, Viviana, grazie. Thank you very much. So I was born in Italy, in Florence, Italy, to an American mother, a Russian father. We were only 8 kilometers from Florence, but we were living in an area where the language that was spoken was still an antiquer version of the language. We grew up in very close to where Machiavelli was sent in exile and in the house where Michelangelo's teacher used to live. It was a beautiful environment. My parents were both artists, so we grew up in this freedom. They were busy doing their artwork, and we were busy running around the countryside with our friends there. The Italian that I learned, the Fiorentino, as I was saying, was an antiquer version of the Fiorentino that was actually being spoken in the city, which is probably one of the reasons why when I started reading Pinocchio as an adult, the language really resonated with me because it actually was the language that I had grown up with in the countryside. I even went to school in the countryside there. So until the age of 11, that was the Fiorentino that I heard spoken from, or the Toscano that I heard spoken from by the people around me. So this is something that I only realized when I was translating The Adventures of Pinocchio, in fact. I grew up in this artistic environment, and I was very interested. I think growing up in the country, you become curious about things. And I was always very curious about not only the world around me, but the world within us human beings. So after studying natural sciences for 5 years at university, I decided to turn to literature. And that was the path to start. That brought me all the way till Pinocchio. I worked as a translator, and I have been working as a translator and an interpreter for goodness 40 years at this point. So I have always been very much focused on the different ways of saying things in both languages and the different ways in which we see things from different cultural points of views. And I think this is what helped me see The Adventures of Pinocchio as the book that it is, which is on the surface a book written for children. In fact, it was published on Il Giornale per i Bambini, the newspaper for children. But immediately, and it's easy if you read The Adventures of Pinocchio as an adult to see that it has many different layers of meaning and that it's also a book about Italian culture, actually a satire on Italian culture. I hope I haven't given too long of
No, 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 no. And we will be elaborating on many aspects because we really need to dig deeper in here because otherwise we'll just live in playland also reading this book, which is not the intent that Carlo Collodi's had. I think before I start talking about Pinocchio itself, I think we should historically elaborate more on Carlo Lorenzini, aka Carlo Collodi, and really talk about how instrumental his work was in also in the unification of Italy. Also as an educator, a very versatile, proliferous writer, because again, Pinocchio is just one of his masterpieces, but I think we should give him justice and spend a few minutes talking about who Carlo Lorenzini was.
Thank you so much for that question. This is an important year because it's the bicentenary of Lorenzini's birth. So it's a very important year to understand, to focus on who Lorenzini was, because Lorenzini has been completely overshadowed by Pinocchio, his creation. But when Carlo Lorenzini, also known as Carlo Collodi, died, in most of his obituaries, The Adventures of Pinocchio was not even mentioned, despite the great success that it had had, because other books by Lorenzini had had great success, books for children, books for adults. But Lorenzini was not only a writer of nonfiction, he was a very important and very influential journalist. He founded Il Lampione, which was a newspaper written purposely to help people understand what was going on politically. So to shed light, Il Lampione is obviously the street lamp, to help people shed light on what was happening politically in Italy at the time. He wrote on many different newspapers. He was a very important art critic. He was the first art critic to write a positive critique on the Macchiaioli, those which now are known as the Impressionists, the Italian Impressionists. He was friends with the Macchiaioli, actually, and the Macchiaioli also have something to do with the Adventures of Pinocchio. But he was their discussions that were held at the Caffè Michelangelo in Florence, and their friendship was not only of an artistic level, but it was also a political level. Carlo Lorenzini had served in two of the wars of independence for Italians' unification. So he had gone to fight as a volunteer together with some of the Macchiaioli and together with other people too. The professor Cipriani here at the University of Florence claims that if it hadn't been for Carlo Lorenzini, it's very likely that unification of Italy would not have taken place as it did when it did, because Lorenzini wrote, he was also a political journalist, and he wrote a campaign in favor of annexation of Tuscany. He wrote a whole campaign on newspapers, on La Nazione and other newspapers too, for the annexation of Tuscany to the reign of the Kingdom of Sardinia. And that's how, in fact, the unification of Italy started happening. In fact, there are many conferences held with Lorenzini as the center, as a hero of the Risorgimento Italiano, the process that brought to Italy's unification in 1861, or according to some people, if we want to consider Rome, 1870. But the point is, he was known for so many different aspects of his artistic and political life and the influence that he had. He was also a highly regarded music critic. He did not like Verdi, which is interesting, but he wrote on the most important music newspaper in Italy. He was all over the place, all over newspapers, and he was incredibly prolific, as you were saying, yes, and highly influential. He wrote for children. He wrote to help write the Nuovo Vocabolario della Lingua Italiana that Rigutini wanted. This was a dictionary that was supposed to help Italians learn standard Italian that most Italians at the moment of unification of Italy did not speak. So he was trying to form Italians through his journalistic pieces, through his fictional pieces, he was also a highly regarded theater critic, and he wrote theater, and through his theater pieces, through books for children. So he helped write the Nuovo Vocabolario della Lingua Italiana for Italians to start speaking or knowing standard Italian, but above all, he turned to children's literature and school texts to help unify Italy linguistically too. We all know that Azeglio said that se fatta l'Italia dobbiamo fare gli
Gli
italiani.
Italiani, yeah.
Right. And Carlo Lorenzini
linguistically, he was doing that. Yeah.
He was doing that linguistically, but he was also doing
The
that.
conscience.
He wrote a whole series of books for school children called Giannettino. And Giannettino was this mischievous hero that would go around and discover things that actually Collodi was teaching to the children. So it was Giannettino per l'Italia, Giannettino la storia, Giannettino, a whole series of Giannettini, and they were, I think, in something like, I can't remember exactly. I should remember this, but I don't. But in very few years, 17 reprints of Giannettino were issued. I think there were 9 reprints of Pinocchio between 1880, actually 83, so 81 was Pinocchio, was when Pinocchio was when it started to be published in installments in Il Giornale per i Bambini. 1883 was the first book publication, and then there were 9 reprints by the time Lorenzini died. But yes, he was an incredibly prolific writer and a very influential politician. At the time, if you were in politics, the way now you use the media, in the 90s it was TV, now of course it's other social media. At the time it was journals and newspapers, and he in fact was very aware of that, and he was using his both the ones that he founded or helped found and that he wrote on to be able to influence people politically and to be active politically.
So obviously his work touched so many people and made such a huge impact that we would almost give for granted that he was a highly educated man. But he was a self-taught man, a little bit of Pinocchio himself.
Absolutely.
Can you elaborate a little bit? Do you think that there are traits of Pinocchio that are indeed Collodi?
Absolutely, absolutely. What a great question. Yes. Um, Collodi or Lorenzini wrote a story in his in another set of short stories, and the story is entitled Quando ero ragazzo. So he's talking
Mhm.
about himself, and many of the things. So he talks about himself in school. Well, um, the behaviors that he tells about himself in school are then behaviors that Pinocchio holds in school in The Adventures of Pinocchio. Actually, it has been said by several critics that Pinocchio is in reality an alter ego of Carlo Lorenzini. And talking about education. Um, Carlo Lorenzini at one point had stopped school. He had decided to quit school the same way Pinocchio decides to quit school on and off. The fact was that Carlo Lorenzini was born to um, Domenico Lorenzini and Angelina Orzali, who were Domenico was the cook and Angelina was dama di compagnia, say the maid that would keep company to the Conti Ginori, Ginori Lisci. Carlo was the first of 10 children, and his brother Paolo was the second. The first two survived. I think only four of the children of the Lorenzini family reached adulthood. But Paolo and Carlo were taken under the protection of the Marchesi Ginori Lisci, and they paid for their schooling. Carlo was supposed to become a priest, and he was sent to the school that there was in Colle Valdelsa, and he was studying to become a priest, and he was actually a very after the elementary school, and he was actually a very good, an exceptionally good student, the same way Pinocchio is when he applies. And at one point, he decides there's some things that happen in the family. He starts growing a consciousness of a social justice consciousness, and he decides that he doesn't want the Ginori Lisci to pay for his school any longer, and he quits school. And he actually writes about no, his nephew writes about when he decided to quit school. His uncle told him that he was not allowed to quit school and that he had to continue. So he was sent to the Scolopi school right here, right in Florence, and he only attended school until he got his high school degree. He had to stop studying because his father died, so he had to take care of the family. And he was an incredibly cultured man. His intellectual level was known throughout Europe. When he died, people came from France and all over Italy to write about this intellectual and highly learned man who had uh, who had passed. So he was, as Pinocchio is, because Pinocchio completes his studies at the end of the book, not by going to school, but after a hard day's work, after he's learned the importance of education and of hard work, that he completes his studies. So yes, absolutely, they are both educated, really. They both complete their education on their own.
Mhm. So it looks like the theme of education is probably one of the most striking themes of this book. And also, we have to consider what was happening in Italy, where prior children and also girls didn't have the same ability to go to school. It was not compulsory. So now we are studying because if you send a child that could have worked in the fields, you're taking labor out of it. So now we are moving into a transition where there is also a Russian proverb that says knowledge is strength. And I think that's one of the points that Carlo Lorenzini makes in this book. And we can more elaborate on the idea that education will save you, will not make you a victim. And we can talk about Pinocchio also as a donkey and in Paese dei Balocchi in Playland. So, and how eventually he redeems himself. So,
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, absolutely, Viviana. Um, So there are many points to make here. So we said that on the surface, The Adventures of Pinocchio is a book for children. Then there are many layers of meaning. Then there's this layer of meaning that is a satire on Italians and their customs. But then we have another layer of meaning, which touches very important and I actually themes that are always relevant in every time and place. And one of those themes is the theme of the importance of education. So, in reality, and I'm going to open a parenthesis here, The Adventures of Pinocchio is not a book about the importance of not lying. And how can we be sure of this? This is not an interpretation. We can be sure of this because, as I was saying, The Adventures of Pinocchio was published in installments on Il Giornale per i Bambini, and it was supposed to end at chapter 15 when Pinocchio ends up hanged from a tree by the cat and the fox. And that was the end of the story. Then children wrote letters and letters and letters to the Giornale per i Bambini. So Carlo Collodi or Carlo Lorenzini was convinced to resume the story, which he kept writing until 1883. In that first part of the story, Pinocchio's nose, so until chapter 15, Pinocchio's nose never grows because of telling a lie. Never. His nose does grow for other reasons. He does say lies and nothing happens to his nose. So we can be sure that that was not supposed to be the theme of the book. In chapter 4, instead, the talking cricket, the grillo parlante, tells Pinocchio that if he doesn't go to school or if he doesn't learn a trade, he will become un bellissimo somaro, a beautiful, meaning a very big donkey, and everybody will take advantage of him. So this is a theme that Lorenzini picks up again at the end of the book. So in the second part of the book, which is the one that he kept writing, when he sends Pinocchio and Lucignolo Lampwick to the Paese dei Balocchi playland, which is a beautiful place for Lampwick, where children never have to study and they spend all day, every day, playing to their heart's content. And what happens after 4 months there? Pinocchio and Lampwick wake up with donkey ears. Then they become real donkeys. They began to bray. they can't be understood by people, and they're sold off as donkeys at a local market. In Italian, the word donkey, somaro or asino, is used for two metaphors. To be a donkey means to not be good in school, and not because you're stupid, but because you refuse to study, and that's important. And to be a donkey also means to work like a donkey. We say lavorare come un asino or come un ciuco. And often especially in Collodi's days, donkeys would just die because of hard work. And that's what happens to Lucignolo. There are these several moments in the Adventures of Pinocchio that are very upsetting. I myself, I can't read that passage without tearing up. I couldn't translate it without crying. It's a terrible moment in which Lampwick, Lucignolo, dies because he's worked to death. So the message, and Pinocchio almost dies because of being a donkey. First, he works in a circus. There's this terrible moment in which he's crying and he's calling the blue-haired fairy, and nobody can understand him, and everybody's laughing at him, and he's broken his leg, and then he gets thrown into the sea so they can make a drum out of his to drown him, so they can make a drum out of his hide, and the fish save him. The message that Lorenzini is sending is that if you're a donkey at school, you will be treated as a donkey in your life, and people will take advantage of you. You also risk dying the death of a donkey. So not only will people continue to, in the metaphor of the puppet, because we all know that Pinocchio in the end, from being a puppet, becomes a real little boy. So he becomes a real little boy when he learns the importance of education, which allows him to care for the people around him and the people that he loves. So it's only when, through education and through hard work and through learning from his mistakes, that he understands the importance of caring for other people, that he becomes a true human being. So he's no longer a puppet. So having gone through this process of education, nobody can any longer pull his strings. He will not live the life of a donkey. And that is the main message of the Adventures of Pinocchio, with many other messages that are just as important and just as poignant.
So it's hard to learn when your stomach is empty, isn't it?
Right.
So that's another, Italian culture is always associated with food. Here is a constant hunger from beginning to end. But there are also some episodes that related to the Osteria Gambero Rosso, Lode. So Carlo Lorenzini, I think, I'm not sure, but did he write Pane e Libri? So he was not in good terms with some of the politicians that wanted to quiet his voice down. But that's a great point. I mean, we see in schools nowadays, children can learn if they haven't had a meal. And that seems to be Pinocchio's. If he's not lying, he's hungry, not kidding.
Yes. So true. Hunger is one of the other main themes of the Adventures of Pinocchio. And this is another point. As you were saying, Lorenzini was an advocate for children not only going to school, boys and girls. So he was an advocate for children's education, but before that, for children to be able to have their bellies full, their tummies full, in order to learn. And he wrote this article. It was an open letter to the Minister of Education, and this open letter was then it was published, and it was then nicknamed Pane Libri. And in this letter, he wrote that unless we help our families, the families in this country, feed their children, how can we expect them to send their children and how can we to school, and how can we expect the children to learn anything if they have an empty stomach? This was one of the articles that infuriated the government. Because, well, I have to rewind a minute. After Lorenzini had fought so fervently, both putting his life at stake in the wars of independence and then writing on newspapers, so first through his sword, then through his pen, when Italy was finally formed, he became very disillusioned with the way Italy was being run and with the way politicians were doing, or rather not doing, their job. And so he started writing articles, and these articles infuriated the government and the various ministers. And at one point, because writing as a journalist and as a nonfiction writer as well was not remunerative, Lorenzini had a job as a civil servant. And so he would get his salary from the Italian government, and they let him know that if he didn't stop criticizing the government the way he was, that they were going to fire him. That's one of the reasons why many scholars think that he started writing more for children. He never actually stopped writing his journalistic pieces, but he concentrated more on children's literature at that point. Then the government let him know that as long as he didn't get too specific, he could write again for adults in newspapers. But that's one of the reasons why he started writing for children, together with the fact that he did want to form the future generation of people who would be running the country, because he had been so disillusioned by what was going on at the time. So this article that you were speaking about, Pane Libri, was an article that remarked the importance of the government making it possible for the families to, before they sent their children to school, to fill their tummies with bread, food. It's very interesting. Pinocchio is hungry all throughout the book. Hunger is one of the main characters of The Adventures of Pinocchio. And I was listening to Dacia Maraini talk about this, tying this exactly to her experience of living in concentration camps during the Second World War and to The Adventures of Pinocchio. She said that in the concentration camps, in the evenings, people would start describing food in minute detail so that they could at least imagine food. And she said this is something that, and rightly so, Lorenzini does in The Adventures of Pinocchio. He describes dishes. And something else that is very interesting is that he describes dishes from Milano, the cotoletta alla milanese, to Naples. So he is doing something that then Artusi did with his book. He's unifying Italy through cuisine in The Adventures of Pinocchio, before Artusi did it with L'arte di cucinare, mangiar bene. Can't remember, it's a long, anyway, his cookbook that that he wrote to unify Italy linguistically and through culinary art. Um, so, all throughout the book, we read about food. Food is constantly present in the adventures of Pinocchio. Yes.
Mhm. And then the osteria where the Gatto la Volpe decide to take Pinocchio is also the name of it. It's quite interesting because it lent then to something that we still recognize today. Can you
Yes.
elaborate on the name of that osteria?
I'd love to. Okay. So many things to save in here. Tell me if I get too long and too prolisa, if I speak too much. So this is really funny. You know well that here in Italy, people doing business together, need to share a meal before they feel comfortable with the party that they're doing business with. And it struck me while I was reading Pinocchio, I thought, so why do Il Gatto e la Volpe bring Pinocchio to the Osteria del Gambero Rosso? Why don't they just steal his coins, his gold coins from him? Why do they have to go to the Osteria del Gambero Rosso? And a little bit as a joke, but somehow I can't stop thinking that maybe this is a joke that Lorenzini was making as well. Maybe they considered stealing Pinocchio's gold coins from him through the making him plant his coins in the field of miracles as a business transaction. But the point is, they bring him to the Osteria del Gambero Rosso. Now, um, the Lorenzinis, Paolo and Carlo, would spend time in an area in Florence called Castello, which is at the base of the mountain north of Florence called Monte Morello. So they would spend time there because Paolo Lorenzini was closer to his job that he was doing for the Ginori Lisci. He was the manager of their factory of porcelain. And he is actually the person that made their factory so famous in the world. And still today, Ginori, Porcellane Ginori are worldwide known. In any case, so they would go spend time there, and there are several osterie in the area, and there's one there that seems to be the Osteria del Gambero Rosso, and there's several are the one that Lorenzini had called l'Osteria del Gambero Rosso in the Adventures of Pinocchio, because there's several people and places that inspired Lorenzini for the Adventures of Pinocchio. Il Gambero Rosso has become well, it is the name of the foremost food and drink magazine here in Italy, of our gastronomic and enologic guides. So Gambero Rosso has become synonym of good food and good wine. There are scores of restaurants all throughout Italy that are called Il Gambero Rosso. Now, Gambero is the crayfish is a crayfish. So one would think, why in the world is an osteria called Il Gambero Rosso? And the point here around Florence, why is Lorenzini thinking gamberi? Well, Monte Morello has all of these little streams that run down into what we call La Piana di Firenze, which is piece of flat land that used to be, now is flat land. There still is a lake, but it all used to be a ginormous lake. And all these little streams would go into that lake. That was called Il Mare. And in the water from these streams, there were tiny little crayfish, and that's what people would eat. So there is a connection to the gamberetti that were in the water, the little crayfish. It's interesting, though, that Il gatto, la volpe, il gambero rosso, the cat and the fox, the gambero rosso, are phrases that Lorenzini has invented and have remained in Italian language. The word Pinocchio itself has used to mean pine nut, and since the Adventures of Pinocchio, we use the word that instead was the Tuscan word, Pinolo. But he has changed Italian language. Little Red Riding Hood, because another thing that Carlo Lorenzini did that I didn't say, he was a translator, and he translated Perrault's fairy tales, and he translated Little Red Riding Hood, and he is the one who invented Cappuccetto Rosso, the word for, or the name of Little Red Riding Hood in Italian, and it stuck. It had been translated before, and she had another name, but the name that he gave her stuck. It's amazing how much, and how he has transformed the language and the culture in Italy, really.
Indeed. So we're going to go into a short break, and then we're going to talk about Pinocchio, kind of perceiving the Italian identity through the adventures of Pinocchio. So don't go anywhere.
Do you love Italian food? Want to learn the secrets of homemade pasta, sauces, and traditional recipes, just like Nana used to make? At Mondo Italiano, our authentic Italian cooking classes bring the taste of Italy right to Pittsburgh. From fresh pasta to regional specialties, every class is a delicious journey through Italy's culinary traditions. Spots fill quickly, so reserve your seat today. Call us at 412-478-2681 or find us online. Mondo Italiano, where Italy comes alive one dish at a time.
Un caffè, per favore. For more than 35 years, Pittsburgh has started its mornings with La Prima Espresso. From freshly roasted beans from around the world to the perfect espresso or cappuccino, every cup is crafted with care. Stop by and enjoy the warmth of our baristas and familiar faces, or bring the taste of Italy home. Order online today at laprima.com. La Prima Espresso, Pittsburgh's coffee. Okay, we're back with Anna Kraczyna. We are definitely going on an adventure through the adventures of Pinocchio, the true meanings that Carlo Lorenzini wanted to, in a way, subtlety, sometimes more openly, wanted the audience to get from this novel. And perhaps also the fact that maybe the parents were going to read this to their children the same way that perhaps you have done it with your family. Who is reading the book? Is it just the child, or is going to be the adult? And he's also very good at portraying some of the characteristics of Italian behavior. So I'm going to just throw a few things at you, and then maybe you can tie it in with the actual novel. Bella figura. Do we see that in Pinocchio?
We see it everywhere in Pinocchio. We see it from the first chapter, in which we see Geppetto and Polendina, who are these two old characters. They are poor, and despite the fact that they're poor, they are wearing, they are both wearing wigs. And we know they're wearing wigs because when they get into a fight, they bite each other, they hit each other, and they rip off each other's wigs. So what is this telling us? That not only is this funny for children, of course, but that's the first example of bella figura in the Adventures of Pinocchio. Why are they wearing their wigs? Because even in extreme poverty, they want to make a good impression. Bella figura is not only an aesthetic concept, but it's also an holistic concept. Bella figura is making a good impression. You know good and well how here in Italy it's everything is about either bella or brutta figura. in Pinocchio, in the Adventures of Pinocchio, his school friends get furious with him because when he's good in school, they make them look bad to the teacher and gli fanno fare una brutta figura. So they can't do a bella figura because of Pinocchio. And it's all throughout the story, we have this attention to bella figura. But then there are other aspects, the concept of furbizia that il gatto la volpe represent. Furbizia in all of its nuances. If you look in an Italian English dictionary, you look at furbizia or furbo. Furbo means cunning, sly, deceitful, which are all negative terms in English. In Italy, there's a world of difference between fare il furbo, which is negative and means taking an unfair advantage, like jumping the queue, and essere furbo, which means knowing how to get along in life. And we have examples of both these kinds of furbizia in the Adventures of Pinocchio. Il gatto e la volpe are trying to be fare furbi, so they're trying to steal Pinocchio's coins. But Melampo, who is the dog that has just died and that Pinocchio has to substitute, through furbizia, actually had managed to survive the condition in which the farmer kept him. He was starving to death, and this was true for dogs. When I was growing up, farmers in Italy would keep their dogs on a chain for their whole lives and give them barely enough food to stay alive, but they thought that they didn't have that much food to give them, but also by keeping them hungry, that they would be better watchdogs. Now, what did Melampo do? And this is what Pinocchio discovers. Melampo was in cahoots with the weasels that would come and steal chickens. And for every 8 chickens that they would steal, they would give Melampo 1 neatly plucked chicken, which of course is, Collodi is talking about bribery here, because that's a 12.5% kickback. Of course, it's a tangente. Melampo, in exchange for not barking, would get this chicken. And that's how he would stay alive. So I wonder, is Collodi giving us an example of furbizia as a tool for survival in a world where social injustice is so deep that poverty is omnipresent, and characters, the dog, nobody has enough to eat.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So you just say plucked chicken, and I don't remember if it was plucked birds or plucked chicken, but there is an historical interpretation to the word spennato. Can you elaborate on that? Because again, the language and the choice of language and the way that Lorenzini described things without necessarily naming the thing. But the spennato, I think it's historically important to mention.
Yeah. So when Italy was unified, la prendo larga, so but I need to
E di c'era una volta, once upon a time, there was a unified Italy.
Right. So when Italy was unified, the capital was in Turin. And then, because of the fact that it was too distant from the rest of the country, the long peninsula, the capital was moved from Turin to Florence. And so in the 2 years prior to moving the capital to Florence, you can just imagine the king, all of the offices and the bureaucracy and the families tied to the whole bureaucracy of the kingdom and the capital. In Florence, they built an incredible amount of housing, and they threw the old walls down and created the viali, the avenues that go around the center of the city, and they created Piazzale Michelangelo, and they threw all the poor people down the Arno River towards the Porta di San Frediano, beyond the Porta di San Frediano, and many people speculated in this building of this new city of Florence that was supposed to be the capital. And when the Breccia di Porta Pia took place, meaning when, Florence was capital from 65 to 67. No, wait, I'm getting my dates confused. It was until 1870, because, so from 67 to 70, because when Rome was taken from the Pope, then the capital was moved to Rome. And all of these people left Florence. So what happened was that all the people that had speculated instead in Florence were left penniless, and the city went bankrupt. So when Lorenzini is writing about Il Paese dei Citrulli, so the dodo land, he talks about uccelli spennati, he talks about foxes without tails. So he's talking about all these people that had actually been spennati. Their beautiful feathers had been taken away, meaning that they had been ripped off by the fact that the capital actually then was moved. I don't know if, Viviana, you know something that is more historically explains the spennati.
No, that actually, because pennato means penniless. So
It means penniless,
yes. So in that instance, it fits perfectly come un guanto.
Right.
Another attitude that we see, Pinocchio manages to rescue himself or to embrace Mangiafuoco with another F word. With furbizia was one, flattery is another one.
Exactly. Yes. So in Italy, and this is still true today, if you go to Rome and you go to a restaurant, the waiter will call you dottore or dottoressa if they want to flatter you, even if they don't know whether you have a university degree or not. So in Italy, we use titles a lot. And we use a title for an accountant and for an architect and for a lawyer, and for practically every job has a title. Now, when Pinocchio is trying to ingratiate Mangiafuoco, fire eater, and he starts begging him, he says he uses titles that go from signor and trying to win over Mangiafuoco's heart, and Mangiafuoco resists, and he says there are no misters here, and Pinocchio uses a higher title, and Mangiafuoco doesn't give in. He finally gives in when Pinocchio uses Your Excellency. So he uses titles that grow in importance and splendor until Mangiafuoco finally gives in. And Mangiafuoco, when he does give in, he says, "So, what do you want from me?" So the game is so clear that Pinocchio is using flattery to win Mangiafuoco over, and to do that, he's using titles. And it's still true today. People do that still today.
Yes, indeed. My last F before then we dive into your collaboration with John Hooper is still F for fatalism. Even though Pinocchio's nose only grows maybe twice throughout the whole story, ci vuole pazienza is something that we're going to hear over and over and over again.
Yes.
How do you justify this expression? What can the expression tell us beyond you need patience? I think there is a deeper meaning to that.
There is. You will hear ci vuole pazienza constantly in Italy. It's in Italians' DNA. Why? Well, if you think that from the fall of the Roman Empire, so in 487, I think I might don't take that far for good, but from the fall of the Roman Empire to Italy's unification, the country was constantly under the domination of a foreign ruler and under the influence, if not the domination of a foreign ruler. You can understand. And so that's 14 centuries of political unstableness. Italians had no say over their own destiny. They had no way to have agency over their own destiny. You can understand at that point why, oh, well, ci vuole pazienza is something that is so deeply rooted in Italians' DNA. And we use it all the time. Ci vuole pazienza. And you can translate it with patience is needed, but in reality, it's an, oh, well, what can you do about it? And in fact, Italians couldn't do anything about the political changes that were taking place over constantly in all throughout these 14 centuries. So yes, true. It really does.
And especially with the bureaucracy that Italy still has, ci vuole molta pazienza, even
Absolutely.
to get a simple certificate done. And let's not go into the authorities, but again, even in some of the depictions of the book, maybe I have one. There is, people arresting the wrong people. What's your take there? I mean, it almost feels like it was written for our days.
Yes.
So
The themes are universal. The themes in the Adventures of Pinocchio are universal. The way all the things that Lorenzini describes in his book, so his satire on Italians works as well today as it did in the time that he wrote the book. All the themes that are in the book, and we have touched on some, are universal. They work in every time and place. The police, and by the way, it's the first fictional piece of literature in which the carabinieri are depicted, the adventures of Pinocchio. The carabinieri we can see as, let's say, the police. They always do the wrong thing. They arrest the wrong person every time they come into the picture. So in reality, the carabinieri in a book for children are seen, we could see them as the bad guys. In any case, someone to be afraid of. And this speaks volumes about Italians never feeling comfortable with authority in general and the forces of law and order, just because of what we were saying. But it gets better. This is a book also that talks about social injustice. The carabinieri arrest the wrong person. When Pinocchio decides to go to court to tell the judge that the cat and the fox have stolen his gold coins, we get to court and we see that the judge is an ape. And that in itself speaks volumes, right? The ape, for bella figura, is wearing gold glasses with no lenses in them. So again, we have bella figura. But what happens? Pinocchio tells the judge that he has been victim of theft, and he describes who stole the gold coins, and the judge has sympathy for him and says, okay, guards, bring Pinocchio to jail. So Pinocchio is thrown to jail. instead of the cat and the fox. And the reason why is declared by the judge, because Pinocchio was gullible. So this is a story written for children in which the messages are watch out for authority, and if you ask for justice, you probably won't get it. And if you're gullible, you're going to pay for it.
Mhm.
So it's like it's a world turned upside down.
Yeah.
So really, social justice is another one of the universal themes that are present in the Adventures of Pinocchio from beginning to end.
Mhm. So let's dive into your collaboration with John Hooper. Your backgrounds are different, perhaps also the approach to the translation work. So the question is twofold. The first one, how did this project come about? And two, you might have been more academic focused on literary fidelity. He, as a journalist, might have been focused more on readability. So I'm sure there were instances where you didn't see eye to eye. Does it go in front of a judge, or did you have to amicably give in? This time you give in, this time I give out. So first, how the project landed on you, and then how the actual translation collaboration unfolded.
So at the time, we were both teaching at Stanford and Florence. That's one thing that I didn't say, is that I teach Italian culture and literature and language here at universities in Florence. And at the time, we were both at Stanford, Florence, and John had written a bestseller on the Italians called The Italians. And because of that, I asked him if he had any idea that there's another bestseller that The Adventures of Pinocchio is, after the Bible, the most translated book in the world. So close parenthesis. I asked him if he realized that there was another bestseller that spoke about Italy and Italians, and that was The Adventures of Pinocchio. He became very interested. So we wrote an article together for the New York Times, and then Penguin Classics became interested, and I was very very focused on what this book actually is about, because it's not a book about the importance of not lying. And Penguin Classics wanted translation as well. So we agreed to do a translation and to have endnotes on the book and in the book and an introduction in which we talk about the some of the true, there it is, yes, some of the true messages of The Adventures of Pinocchio. And it was for me, as I was saying at the beginning, un tuffo nel passato, meaning that I went back, I went down memory lane for the language, because some words really were still used in the countryside around Florence when I was growing up. I was very, I was very passionate about giving justice to Carlo Lorenzini, the writer. Yes, readability is essential when you are working on a translation, so that readability in the target language is important, essential, I repeat. But we cannot try more than our very best to be as faithful as possible to the original language. And yes, it's true. Some things we just can't translate. Puns, hidden meanings are totally untranslatable. the Toscanita, the Tuscanness of the language is lost in translation. So many parts we had to let go of. Yes, John was the person reading for readability, going over my translation for readability. And he jokes often about the fact that I would say, no, that we can't settle for that because we absolutely have to do a better job in rendering the Toscanita. And we either would have become really bad enemies are great friends, and I'm so happy to say that the second of the scenarios is what happened. And he still jokes with me, if you need anybody to yell at, just give me a call.
But I don't know. I wonder, is there like sometimes you resort to third parties, so someone that's a little neutral, potentially for resolving, I don't want to call it conflict, but to take an objective opinion, or is that what is done in the industry, or?
Of course, Penguin had an editor read over everything. There's a fun incident that I need to slip in here. At one point, we translated that. At one point in the story, Pinocchio heard the bells ring, and the editor got back to us saying, what bells? You guys haven't mentioned any bells until now, so what bells? And we thought about it and we realized that in Italy, you say the bells are ringing because wherever you are, you will be hearing bells ringing. So it's normal that bells will ring because we have so many churches in Italy. So that's a fun fact. We asked colleague and good friend from Columbia University, Professor Bianca Finzi-Contini Calabresi, to help us detect British English versus American English, because John is British and I come from an American household. So my British detector became very good during the translation. And sometimes because this book is for both the American audience and the British audience, we had to make sure that it wasn't British English only. So there where we were uncertain, we asked Bianca to help us, and she was really great at helping us solve these situations. Yeah.
I just have a couple of questions. Obviously, is there any production or other iterations of the translation or anything that you would give the thumbs up? And the other ones, I say, it's, it's just for pleasing people, not really to give justice to Carlo Lorenzini.
So there have been so many movies that came out in between 2022 and 2023. There were 4 movies. There was a Disney remake. There was Italian Matteo Garrone. There was a Russian one. There was Guillermo del Toro. There's the original 1940 film cartoon by Walt Disney. And that has completely changed the idea, even the visual idea that people have of Pinocchio. But Walt Disney, whom I don't particularly care for, but Walt Disney is an artist using one piece of art for inspiration. And we all know, if we watch Walt Disney, what we're going to get. A version that is not faithful to the original piece of art, which is the book. Walt Disney's Pinocchio was produced in 1940. That's when Italy was not popular in the United States because it had just gone to war against the United States' European allies. So Disney sets it in an alpine environment. Geppetto speaks with an Eastern European accent. Pinocchio is this cute, chubby little, sweet, adorable little chum who has nothing to do with the lanky, almost aggressive looking Pinocchio that is in the original book that Carlo Lorenzini approved. Talking about films, in these last films, again, everybody is doing their own work, which we cannot tell an artist that he's doing something wrong if he is reinterpreting another piece of artwork according to his style. But I don't particularly care for any of the films. The one that I do like is the one by Comencini, which was done in the 1970s. If I'm not
Nino Manfredi, Gino Lollobrigida.
right,
I still
yes,
have the VHS tape
19,
in the United
yes,
States.
73,
And
yes.
the little boy with that cute, that it was the only movie he made, actually. He became very famous
Right.
playing the boy, and that was it. But I cherish that VH that tape, like no one can touch it.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. And Viviana, that is the only film in which poverty comes through the screen. You can feel poverty. You can see that they're cold. In every other movie, even in Matteo Garrone's film, you can't feel the poverty, which I was surprised about when Garrone said he had always wanted to make Pinocchio film into a film. I thought, yes, finally someone is going to do justice to the poverty in Pinocchio and the hunger. And instead, it's Comencini who does that. And I believe that it's because we were not so far after the end of the war, and in Italy, people still knew what hunger meant, what poverty meant. And Comencini had actually done a documentary about children in southern Italy and poverty and scolarizzazione of children linked to poverty in southern
Mhm.
Italy. And the boy who plays Lucignolo Lampwick in Comencini's film is one of the children he had actually interviewed.
Wow.
So he is that is the only one that, in my opinion, speaks, uh, reflects the book
Yeah.
in many ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And indeed, it is a matter of life. Those elements, unfortunately, do exist. They're under our nose day in and day out. And even though we might want to shelter our children, the younger generation, but it's called life. Uh,
Mhm.
and if we do remove the obstacles or the ugliness, how they're going to learn the life skills to make it through once something might happen. But Collodi or Lorenzini has a great way of portraying something that might be a little more cruel or cruento, and then a positive image. So it's kind of, it doesn't leave us in the darkness. It kind of allows us to take a breath.
That is so true. He's giving us really presenting the readers with really disturbing moments, and immediately after he makes you laugh. It's amazing how he does that. And he's also telling children that life is made of falling down and picking yourself up again. It's as if he were telling us that it's okay to fall and that you will fall in life, but it's okay as long as you pick yourself up again. Because the whole story is about Pinocchio falling down and picking himself up again. And I couldn't agree more. If children don't learn this through fairy tales when their parents are reading them the fairy tales, so they are in a secure, safe environment, and then are able to see that everything is okay in the end. How will they be able to get along in life? Because life is also made of falling down. I also work as a coach, and that's what I tell my coachees all the time. They tell us life is going to be easy. It's not. Life is made of difficult moments, and it's up to us how we want to decide to react to the difficulties in life. And that's what Pinocchio is all about.
Yeah. And I think this is indeed the message that the Pinocchio perhaps is not born human, but definitely he becomes human. And you become human through education, empathy, and responsibility. And that feels like a message we need now more than ever. And perhaps it's not a children's story, but it's a civic manifesto. That's how we should definitely get a copy, reread it, and relate to it, and put it into the 21st century. Anna, this has been a very delightful conversation. I don't know if there is anything else that you would like to add that we didn't cover. We could continue talking for hours.
Oh, hours. Well, you just said it. Pinocchio is a book about also about a human-made creation that gets out of the control of its creator. And we've seen this ever since Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, and we've seen it in Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. We saw it in AI by Spielberg that actually Kubrick wanted to make. But this tells us, this is a book that tells us about what it means to be truly human, what makes someone human, what tells us apart from AI. I couldn't agree more. So you said it, Viviana, and you said it perfectly. Yes, absolutely.
And so I encourage all our readers to re-add Pinocchio to your book clubs and any other avenue that you have, even just for yourself. The Penguin's Random House version that is translated by Anna Kraczyna and Joe Hooper, yellow cover, easy to find. I have my copy here. And I want to thank you and John, that I have not personally met, that I'm sure I will be meeting at some point, for digging deeper. I think you have brought to us Carlo Lorenzini first, because again, Pinocchio might have overshadowed everything that he did for culture in his time, things that I was not aware of myself. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope to have a chance to meet you at some point in Tosca. I haven't visited the park, just to add a child experience to the story. Unfortunately, our time together today is up. Il Big Ben ha detto stop, and it's time for us to say arrivederci e alla prossima. And we want to thank you for tuning in into the program. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any travel topics that you would like us to address, please contact us at the Italian Radio Hour at gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube, or where you catch your favorite podcast. And also, don't forget to share, because sharing is caring. So once again, thank you very much, Anna, for your time and your knowledge.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to our sponsors, Istituto Mondo Italiano e La Prima Espresso. Until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.